Welcome, guys. Welcome to Lang Club. We've just finished a great conversation session, and we are here for our brief little Q&A that we like to do. We're also doing a sort of mini lesson today. There's a few things that I want to talk about before we get started today. And those are some phrases that you can use to sound more native in your speaking. So, I'm an English teacher, and I've been teaching English abroad for almost 10 years now. And I've noticed that a lot of times textbooks teach a type of English that is not actually correct. It may be grammatically correct, and it may be correct according to the language, but a lot of times my students use words and phrases that we don't actually use in our real conversations. And today I'm going to talk about a few of those and give you a few alternatives of phrases that you can use as well. So I'm just going to talk it out. I am recording my presentation today, so guys, if you want to see this information later, you can always go to our YouTube channel, which we will link to you at the end, and you can check it out. I will make it into a little video. So today I just want to briefly talk about phrases to sound more native, and at the end we are going to have a Q&A, and you guys can ask whatever you want. You guys can ask me any questions at all about English. First things first, there's nothing wrong with saying the phrase thank you. It is a completely normal phrase to use. People do say thank you, but it is probably not the default phrase that native speakers would say. Instead of saying thank you, which sounds very formal and a bit stuffy, it's far more common to hear somebody say thanks, many thanks, I appreciate it, thanks a lot, something like that. In my day-to-day life, I would rarely actually use the phrase, thank you. I would say something else. Thank you almost sounds too robotic, sort of too memorized and too repeated. It doesn't really sound genuine or natural. On the other hand, the response, you're welcome, also sounds very formal and very serious. It doesn't really sound that genuine. Some expressions that you could use instead are, no problem, no worries, don't mention it, anytime, my pleasure, it was nothing. These sound a lot more genuine, a lot more heartfelt than simply saying you're welcome, which sounds very standard, very robotic, almost like something you're just simply expected to say, rather than something that a native speaker might actually use in their real conversation. Another one I hear a lot, which genuinely nobody, at least nobody where I live, ever says is, how do you do? You would say, how's it going? Or, what's up? Even, how are you? What's going on? How do you do is very archaic. It sounds like something you would read in a Jane Austen novel, not something that people would actually say to one another in real life. And then the biggest offender, the one I hear the most, that I will say is actually wrong, is if I say, how are you? And you respond, I'm fine. So in English classes, a lot of people learn I'm fine or I'm fine, thank you. But it doesn't sound right to native speakers. We don't say that. Fine means adequate. If you say I'm fine, it means to us that there's something wrong, that you're not okay, that things are not going well at all. You would say I'm fine if you're having a bad day. So when we hear people say, I'm fine, it sounds very, very strange to us as native speakers, at least in the United States. We never use this phrase. What you would want to say instead is something like, I'm okay, I'm doing great, I'm doing well. Grammatically, you probably should say, I'm well, although again, that's something that sounds way too formal. Nobody really says, I'm well. Even though it's grammatically incorrect, if you want to sound native, people would say, I'm good, or I'm doing good. You could say, I'm all right, pretty good, or I can't complain. One thing, if I were to give any piece of advice to anyone that's learning and that wants to really sound native and natural in their speech, the one thing I would really want to stress is to avoid the phrase, I'm fine. It really sounds wrong. It really does not sound natural or native or even correct to a native speaker's ears. My best advice is to try to use some of these alternative phrases that I have supplied today. But these are small things that actually make a huge difference in your speaking. Accent is fine, and pronunciation is fine, but if you really want to sound native, you need to use the correct phrases that people actually use. Not textbook English, which sounds very robotic and memorized, but really natural English. A few weeks ago, we talked about ways to practice this through shadowing. And that's a great way to do it. Listening to television shows, series, and sitcoms, listening to podcasts, people speaking in a very natural way. This is a much better way of learning to sound native than simply studying out of a textbook, because textbooks are far too formal. And in English, we almost never use formal English at all. It doesn't sound right, doesn't sound correct to us. So that's the little mini lesson today. We like to start these out with a little 5-minute mini lesson. And now it is time for me to open this up to you guys for questions that you have. Any questions you might have at all about English. You're welcome to ask questions about the IELTS exam, the TOEFL exam, the SAT. You can ask a question about grammar, English expressions. You can ask a question about the United States, a cultural question. I'm happy to do my best to answer that as well. One of the best resources is simply the actual British Council website. They do post some of the previous exams there and the practice exams. As a teacher, my favorite website that I use with my students is a blog called IELTS Liz, L-I-Z. Liz is an English teacher, and she has an entire website dedicated to practice exams and tips and tricks and things like that. So you can go to her website, and she will have lists of practice speaking questions, readings from previous exams, listening portions. So it's incredibly comprehensive. Between those two sources, between the British Council website itself and the IELTS Liz blog, you'll find more resources than you could ever need. They're both fantastic, and they should both have lots of practice materials for you. You know, that's one thing I really like about the IELTS exam rather than the TOEFL. The TOEFL changed a few years ago, and so a lot of the practice materials are obsolete. I think 2019 they updated their exam, and they're very private about their practice materials. IELTS, on the other hand, has lots and lots of practice materials available. Many, many practice exams, practice tests, materials that you can use, not only from the British Council itself, but from other teachers. So personally, I prefer the IELTS. Number one, I think it's a better test. That's just my personal opinion about it. I think it's a more comprehensive test. I just like it better. I like the structure of it a lot better. But number two, just because it's a lot easier for students to practice and prepare, and there's a lot more materials out there for that. So yeah, British Council and IELTS Liz, shout out to both of them, both fantastic sources, so you can learn a lot from them. As a teacher, I'm a huge fan of root words. I think that root words are fantastic because they allow you to not only understand a new word if you encounter it by putting the pieces together, but there's a really interesting mechanic in English that allows you to create words using root words that are correct. You can make up a word by putting the right root words together, and it's a real word. It will be a real word. Our root words come from Greek and mostly Latin, although they are from Greek as well. And honestly, the best way to start is just by searching for a list of most common root words, maybe the 100 most common Greek root words and the 100 most common Latin root words. A very simple example, I know this might come across as a very silly word to use, but bear with me, is imagine you had never seen the word bicycle, right? You never saw the word bicycle before, and you see it written, and you think, what is that? But you know your root words, and you know that bi means two, you know cycle means wheel, and you can put it together and realize that's a two-wheeled device. Same with a unicycle or a tricycle, right? Tricycle. Once you know your root words, words make a lot more sense. So, for example, the word tele, T-E-L-E, it means far or distance. So television, vision of course is to see, right? Mean you're watching something from a distance. Scope means to watch. Telescope means you're watching things, again, from a distance. Graph or gram means to write. So a telegraph would be you're sending something a far distance away. So by using the root words, it actually makes English language almost like math. It gives you these building blocks that you can put the pieces together, and it is such a great way of expanding vocabulary. The root words are very easily available. Honestly, if you just search maybe the 100 most common Greek root words and 100 most common Latin root words, it will open up a really big range of words available. It's a great way, and I'm a huge proponent of that. I always like to teach that in my classes, and I just think it's fantastic. I don't have them with me right now, but on the YouTube channel, once I get this video out, I will put the links in the notes for the YouTube channel, and I'll put links to some of those resources that you guys can find there. I would love to. The problem is that prepositions are arbitrary. There really are no rules for them. They just have to be memorized. And it's one of the annoying things about English, right? Why do we get in a car, but we get on a bus? I don't know. There's no rule for it. They're just phrases. Just think of them as prepositional phrases. Think of them as whole word phrases. Prepositions are one of those things in English that there actually really aren't any rules for, and they sort of have to be memorized, unfortunately. The good news is they don't really matter when it comes to understanding. If you use the wrong preposition, a native speaker will still understand you. They don't make all that much difference when it comes to actually communicating. Please provide a good app or website for a better British accent. That's difficult because, to be honest, I teach American English. I am from the U.S. and I don't really have much experience teaching British English. I don't have that many resources for British English. Off the top of my head, I would say, British television is probably great. BBC is probably great. That's very much what we would call received pronunciation. It's a very sort of artificial, clear British accent. It is fantastic if you want to get used to listening to it. Now, one piece of advice I can give is, now it's not necessarily the English accent, but it is a accent from the British Isles. If you do want to become more familiar with it, we do have 2 new Lang Club hosts who are from Northern Ireland, and they do have a Northern Irish accent. Northern Ireland is, of course, it's on the island of Ireland. It is a part of the UK. It's not the standard English accent that you would think of, but you're welcome to attend those sessions, and that might be great for accent exposure. Other than that, I'm afraid I don't have many resources for British English. Internationally, I would say British English is not as easy to find resources for, just because it's spoken by a smaller number of people around the world. But there's lots of British television, British movies, things like that would be a great way to start. I will do some searching, and if I can find any good resources, I'll also put them in the links in the video that I'm recording. Yes, more or less. They're there to give the test, and they're very professional about it. And they will be friendly, of course, but they're there to judge you based on the actual questions that they ask. If you happen to say something funny in your answer, if you do make a joke in your answer, that's fine, but it needs to be part of your spoken answer. It shouldn't be just joking around with them unrelated to the tasks that you're given. You're absolutely right. It's an opinion question. Your opinion doesn't matter. You can say any opinion you want. It's all about how you write the essay, how you format your evidence, your argument that you're giving. There's no right or wrong answer in an essay. Never, right? An opinion essay is your opinion, and no one is going to be able to tell you what you believe or not, right? There's no right or wrong answer. It's all about how you structure it. How do you convince the reader that your opinion is right? That's what you're trying to do there, right? So they're judging you based on the structure of your essay, on your grammar, on your vocabulary, on your punctuation, but not on your opinion. There's no right or wrong answer on an opinion essay. I think we're just about out of time today. I wanted to thank you all for your fantastic questions. We'll be back again next week. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a presentation about root words. I think that's a phenomenal idea. I will prepare something for that. So thanks all for being here today, guys. Thanks for listening to me and talking to me and bringing me your questions. Please bring them back again next week, and we'll keep going. In the meantime, check out langclub.live. We host free sessions for English conversational speaking nearly every day of the week, so you can go ahead and register for those in your local time zone, and I hope to see you guys there. So thank you all for being here today, guys. Thank you for talking to me, and I will catch you next time, all right?